Okay, good evening, everyone. Charlotte Burry,
Here.
Penny Cutt,
Here.
Rich Dowley,
Present.
Linda Thomas, Dan Yaffe,
Here.
and Joe Sircruzi.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. Pardon the technical, apparently we have new computers that you could just imagine we're trying to get figured out. So if you see the gentleman with the orange shirt going back and forth, he's helping the helpless. We've all been in that situation. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of I forgot to look up the date, the
So
last
moved.
meeting?
August
Second.
19th.
Is it so moved?
Yeah, I'll second.
Seconded.
Oh, okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Folks, we're just going to take a couple of minutes and explain to you what we're going to be doing here. This is the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're here because you feel that your property doesn't quite fit within the normal rules and regulations of the City of Pompano Beach. And generally, you're asking for a variance, special exception, temporary permit, or some other kind of relief. We're made up of myself, the three members to my left, and two to my right, six of us. We're all residents of City of Pompano Beach. We all serve with no compensation. To my far left is James Saunders, who's the Assistant City Attorney, here to give us legal advice. To my far right is Scott Reale from Development Services, who represents the city. And as I've often said, the most important person is Martha Lawson, who runs everything and keeps us all kind of well-oiled, this machine. I'm going to call the case. First, I'm going to, at some point in a few minutes, I'm going to ask everybody to stand up to be sworn in. And then after that, we'll call the first case. You'll come to this podium over here that I'm pointing to. Give me your name, spell your last name, address, and most importantly, you have to tell me if you've been sworn in. This is a public hearing. You're going to swear what you're saying, basically you're swearing. You're also being recorded in several places, so we just want to verify that you've been sworn in. And then at that point, once that formality is over, Scott Reale is going to give us our staff's report. And after that, you'll have an opportunity to make a full case, bring in experts, testimony, whatever you'd like. These are all public hearings, so at some point I'll ask for the public. First, those in support, and then those in opposition. You'll have time for closing remarks. Most importantly, my job is to see that you get a fair hearing. So if at some point you're a little confused about the process, the procedure, hey, no problem. We'll try to explain it to you the best way we can. Can't make your case, but I can help you to be sure that you have a fair hearing. At that point, when we close the public hearing, after your closing comments, the board will discuss out loud in front of you what their thoughts are. There will be a vote. You have to win. You need 5 affirmative votes. Okay? We're 6 of us. You need to get 5. And you'll know right away. So everything's out in the open. This is really what you'll see as government in the sunshine. And we'll start from here. So firstly, I'd like everyone who thinks they're going to speak, I'd like to do this one time, stand up and be sworn in.
Okay, do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. You may be seated. The first up tonight is, let's see, F1, LN 50, I'm going to read, I love numbers, LN 512, a major temporary use for Montana Enterprises, Inc. and the Beachcomber Villas, Inc., requesting a major temporary use, 23-15-00008. Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Mike Vondermeulen with Keith. Our address is 301 East Atlantic Boulevard in Pompano Beach, and I have been sworn. Spelling my name, Vondermeulen.
Thanks, Mike. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And this is P&Z number 23-15000008. The applicant landowner is requesting a major temporary permit from the provisions of Chapter 155, Article 4, which are the use standards, and Article 5, which are the development standards of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code in order to temporarily utilize 2 adjacent parcels for a temporary sales center and parking without complying with the applicable use and development standards as required by code. The subject property is located on the west side of A1A, which of course is North Ocean Boulevard, between Southeast 12th Street and Southeast 13th Street. The subject property currently contains the sales gallery with associated parking and landscaping, which was approved by the ZBA on September 15th, September 15th, 2022, via major temporary use permit application P&Z number 22-15000014, and later approved through building permit 22-11343 to showcase a forthcoming 27-story, 92-unit residential development at 1350 South Ocean Boulevard. That development was approved via major site plan P&Z number 15-12000002, and the applicant is proposing to utilize the sales center for an additional year, which prompted this application. Vehicular access to the sales center has been provided through the existing parking lot to the south, which has ingress-egress along South Ocean Boulevard. The sales center itself is a 1-story aluminum building comprising approximately 4,000 square feet with a wooden deck and associated landscaping. 10 parking spaces will be reserved for the sales center. The ZBA has approved a number of other sales center galleries for high-end developments on the Barrier Island. Staff does not object and finds the use and layout to be appropriate for the site and the surrounding development. As you know, there are 7 temporary use permit review standards, and should the board determine that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy these review standards, staff requests the board include the following 3 conditions as part of the order. 1, obtain and/or maintain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including building and zoning compliance permits, and a business tax receipt for the sales center. 2, substantial compliance with the conceptual site plan submitted with this application. And 3, prior to the expiration of the temporary use permit, the sales center shall be removed and the affected area shall be replaced with drought-resistant sod. That concludes staff's report.
Thank you, Mr. Alley. Mike.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, again, my name is Mike Vondermeulen. I'm just going to go briefly through a very brief presentation. This is the general location, essentially west of the beachcomber on A1A. This is the site plan. This was also presented to you about a year ago. And if you have been out to the site or did a site visit or have been out to the beach recently, this photograph is from just a few days ago. There were a few delays both in the design and construction of the condominium as well as the sales center. Construction is almost complete. The applicant has spent quite a sum of money on this sales center, so we are hoping to get another year out of it because it essentially has just been completed. And that concludes my presentation.
That's pretty. Scott, has anything changed since last year?
No, through building permit, it was pretty much the same. I think we asked for some additional landscaping or trees along A1A, and I think the applicant complied with that, so.
Okay. This is a public hearing. If anyone in the audience wishes to speak in support, hearing none. Anyone wish to speak in opposition? Not a crowd tonight, hearing none. Mike, any closing comments?
We have no objection to any of the conditions.
Thank you. Public hearing is closed. Board discussion or a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. In planning and zoning, I'm sorry, in P and Z case 23 hyphen, I'm sorry? Oh, it says PZ, I'm sorry. Okay, in ZBA, in the ZBA case, 23-15000008, I move we find there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all requirements for granting the major temporary use have been met, and that we grant the major temporary use subject to the 3 conditions requested by staff.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? In that case, Martha, please call the roll.
Richard Daly,
Yes.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Joe Kurzak,
Yes.
Vinnie Cutt,
Yes.
Linda Thomas,
Yes.
Dan Yaffe.
Yes, you're approved.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. All right. Next up is item number 2, Z 23-11000818. I'm sorry, 23-11000018 for a variance from Kaja Properties, Inc.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Paula West. I am a principal and senior land planner with Plan West. Address is 10152 Indian Town Road, Unit 159, Jupiter, Florida, for the record.
Spell your last.
V-E-S-T.
Have you been sworn?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is case P&Z number 23-11000018. The applicant landowner is requesting a variance from section 155-4303I3A of the City of Pompano Beach zoning code in order to allow a drive-through service facility associated with a car wash to be located approximately 50 feet from a residential zoning district, rather than located at least 100 feet from a residential zoning district as required by code. The property is located on the west side of North Federal Highway between Sample Road and Northeast 39th Street. The parcel is considered a through lot with Northeast 18th Terrace abutting the west lot line. The property was developed in the 1970s and has had a variety of uses. There are currently 2 buildings on the site, one of which has a BTR for a restaurant. The property was annexed into Pompano Beach on September 14th, 2004 via Resolution 2004-323. And the most recently approved site plan was actually a retroactive landscape plan, which was approved in 2006 via P&Z number 06-06000010. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing buildings and redevelop the site with a drive-through car wash facility containing a 4,902 square foot enclosed building area, 11 vacuum stations, and associated parking and landscaping. Car washes require special exception in the B3 zoning district. A pre-application meeting, which was P&Z number 23-12000036, was held on August 8th of this year to discuss the conceptual site plan for the car wash. The zoning reviewer noted that while the drive-through service is an allowable accessory use in the B3 zoning district, such facilities shall be located at least 100 feet from any residential zoning district. The conceptual site plan provided shows the drive-through entrance and stacking located very close to the west property line. Northeast 18th Terrace has a 50-foot width, which separates the subject property from a residential zoning district to the west. Unless modifications are made, the development as proposed would require both special exception approval and a variance from the 100-foot minimum separation from the adjacent residential zoning district. The applicant has concurrently filed a special exception application, which is P&Z number 23-17000007 for the associated special exception. That will be heard this evening as well. It should be noted that the affected residentially zoned property does not actually contain any dwelling units and is in fact a social club. Technically, no dwelling units are located within 100 feet of the drive-through facility. However, the code speaks to residential zoning districts and not whether there are any dwelling units on the residentially zoned property. Additionally, the site will be accessed along existing curb cuts on Federal Highway, and the gate shown on along Northeast 18th Terrace is intended to be used for emergency and fire access only. While the city's adopted transformation plan for Federal Highway discourages the proliferation of new auto-oriented uses, the site is ripe for redevelopment. Additionally, the property immediately to the south is a Wawa convenience store and gas station, and the property to the north is a tire and auto repair business. And the property north of that was recently approved by the ZBA for automotive parts sales with installation for wrapping vehicles with vinyl in an enclosed facility. Thus, it does not seem out of character for an automotive-related use to operate at this site. In addition to addressing the 8 variance review standards, the applicant has submitted a feasibility needs assessment analysis report. That's included in your backup. And the applicant has conducted a voluntary outreach neighborhood meeting on August 21st via Zoom. Notices were sent to landowners of property within 500 feet of the subject property. And although there were only a couple of attendees from the public, the notes from that meeting are included in the applicant's backup. If the variance and special exception are approved, the property will require site plan and building design review. As you know, there are 8 variance review standards. They're included in this report. The applicant has addressed each of them, and should the board determine the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those review standards, staff recommends the board include the following 5 conditions as part of the order. 1, obtains a special exception for the car wash use. 2, obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including site plan, building design, zoning use certificate, and building tax receipt for business tax receipt for the use. 3, close out all open building permits. 4, substantial compliance to the conceptual site plan submitted with this application. And the last recommended staff condition, no operation associated with the use shall occur in a manner that impedes the normal free flow of vehicular or pedestrian traffic on adjacent rights-of-way, which are North Federal Highway and Northeast 18th Terrace. That concludes staff's report. And if you would like, we always have this issue, I can read the special exception staff report now, or we can just focus on the separation.
Well, is it going to be substantially different?
It's not substantially different, no. It's not
Why
substantial.
don't we hold off on that?
Okay.
Let's get this one out of the way.
Okay.
I do have one question for the record. This is a B3 zoning.
Correct, yes.
What are the uses? I think for the record, I would want to know, what are the uses in a B3 other than a car wash?
So it's, B3 is general business, so retail, restaurant, almost, any commercial use that's low intensity can be ones you see up and down Federal Highway, typically restaurants that are in strip malls, that type of thing. I don't know. I can pull up the list.
No, you've
Yeah.
given us some good examples.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
wanted
Yeah,
to.
a lot of things permitted by right in B3. When the zoning code was written, it was determined that a car wash may be a more intense use than certain other B3 uses that are permitted by right. So that's why it was determined that a special exception should be required for the B3 zoning district for a car wash.
Ms. West?
Thank you. So before I get started, we do want to combine our presentation with both requests, if that's okay?
If you're going to do that, then I want to hear.
Certainly. So the special exception, I won't repeat anything. I'll just state the differences. The special exception is P&Z number 23-17000007, and the applicant landowner is requesting special exception approval as required by Section 155-4219H1 of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code in order to utilize the subject property, which is Zone B3, for a car wash. The property is located on the west side of North Federal Highway between Sample Road and Northeast 39th Street. Parcel is a through lot. Now, everything I've said is verbatim from the original, with the exception of this application includes some additional backup. There are 13 special review standards which the applicant has has addressed. They've included a feasibility needs assessment analysis report, a queuing exhibit, a study of a similar car wash drive-through in South Florida, and exhibits showing the sound levels of those vacuums that I mentioned. And I believe that is the only difference, other than that there are 13 special exception review standards, which are different than the review standards for a variance. And should the board determine the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those special exception review standards, staff requests the board include the following 5 conditions. Obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including site plan, building design and zoning use certificate, and business tax receipt. 2, close out all open building permits. 3, substantial compliance with the conceptual site plan submitted with the application. 4, successfully obtain relief, a variance, from the 100-foot separation requirement between a drive-through facility and a residential zoning district, or revise plans to comply with separation requirements. And the 5th recommended staff condition, no operation associated with the use shall occur in a manner that impedes the normal free flow of vehicular or pedestrian traffic on adjacent rights-of-way, Federal Highway and Northeast 18th Terrace. And that is the special exception staff report.
All right.
Keep in mind that we're here now to hear your variance request and the criteria for that.
Yes, thank you. So again, good evening. My name is Paula West. With me, I do have Jenna Loda, who is the counsel for the project. On the ownership side of the business, who is the contract purchaser, Justin Landau and Daryl Peterson. And then all the way in the back is James Argyropoulos, who is the property owner right now as it exists. So Scott's presentation was actually very detailed. The property is 3685 North Federal Highway. We are in the Cypress Estates neighborhood. We are adjacent to auto-oriented uses to the north and to the south. Not sure if you mentioned it, but to the south is that newly constructed Wawa. To the north, we have auto repair and I believe an auto dealer. And then our zoning line, which is the subject of the variance, is the rear property line, which is kind of debatable because I don't believe you can zone right away, but basically our rear property line is that zoning line for an RM12 zoning district. So as I like to do, I combined the standards for both special exception and variance together in several of the slides, and I just kind of wanted to touch on those because they're so similar between the two requests. We are consistent with several policies of the adopted comprehensive plan. Those are in your backup in the justification narrative. Each one of them is addressed. As I mentioned, we are adjacent to auto repair. It's not out of character with the area where we're located. We're fronting a very busy major arterial with commercial uses up and down Federal Highway. In our site plan, you can see that we are accommodating safe and convenient access and circulation for our use to accommodate all of that within the property. We are providing a use that is allowed in the land use and in the zoning, of course, by special exception. And one of the standards of the special exception is the definition of a neighborhood is 500-foot radius or half-a-mile radius, which is that image that you see in front of you. The feasibility and need study that is included in your backup does point out that we do not have any competing car washes within any of those definitions.
Yeah, sorry.
Before, you're talking special exception criteria?
Both.
No. Everything on this page is pretty much special exception criteria, and we want to hear your variance criteria.
Okay. They're all covered in each one of the
Okay,
slides,
but
but that's what I
let's
mean. They're
focus.
combined.
But we're not combining this. We want to hear variances. This is the hearing we're hearing.
Okay. So because this project is going to be constructed new, we are going to be complying with all of the zoning requirements, the building code requirements, life safety requirements, and one of those things that we have to comply with is the use-specific standards, which is the variance request that we're asking for. And as you can see up front and in our narrative, we have addressed all of the use-specific standards, which we have to abide by both for the car wash and for the drive-through service, which in our particular case is the entire building. And the only one of the standards that we cannot comply with is that 100-foot requirement from a residential zoning district. And like I mentioned, the rear property line is the zoning line for the RM12 zoning. As Scott mentioned, what is in the to the rear of us is not a true residential use. It is the Pompano Sail and Power Squadron, which is a social club. They own both of the, sorry about that. They own both of the, to the rear, you could see it, they own both of the property with the building as well as the vacant lot to the north of them. So, as you've seen in the backup, we have images and information that shows that washing your car at home is actually pretty bad for the environment. There's studies that show that washing your car at home actually uses more than 100 gallons of water per vehicle, whereas our car wash uses anywhere between 20 to 45 gallons per vehicle. We also are providing let me go back up. So 90% of the water that we're using in our car washes is actually going to be held in a 2,000-gallon tank, and that's going to be reused for future car washing. Once that is actually used up, the water then goes into a treatment system, which actually cleans the water before it actually goes into either the wastewater or the stormwater system. None of the car washing at home does that. The feasibility study did show that, I'll back up, I won't mention that. Our use actually does not generate a whole lot of traffic compared to banks or restaurants. We actually get vehicles in and out between 2 to 3 minutes. It's gonna be kind of hard, I'm sorry, it's gonna be kind of hard for me to back up with the special exception. I could do that if you want to, or I could just go through it.
I don't want you to feel that your presentation is being affected, so please carry on any way you'd like.
Appreciate it, thank you. So, as I mentioned, the feasibility study does show that there is there's a definite need in this market area, and the market area is defined as 3 miles, 3-mile radius. So, in order to understand the queuing need for our particular use, we looked at similar surrogate sites for an L car wash, and we saw that the peak demand was actually on a Friday and on a Saturday for no more than 12 vehicles, which, as you can see in our site plan, we do accommodate fully on the property. Actually, we more than accommodate that. The hours of operation of our business actually accommodates people who have to go into work very early or come home late, but not too late. And as Scott mentioned, our site plan was reviewed by the DRC for a pre-application meeting, which is actually optional for us. We're a minor site plan. And we understand that we do have to comply with several code requirements, which we're happy to do so. But more importantly, we are definitely putting an emphasis on the septic security of the site, as well as the life safety aspect and circulation, which therefore reduces the overburdening of police and fire services. This image is actually also in your backup, and it shows you the difference between washing at home or doing something like a self-service or a full-service car wash as opposed to our car wash. And Scott also mentioned the sound, which is a big important issue for car washes in general, but any motor vehicle use. We are not only putting in a good amount of money into the equipment that we're using for environmental purposes, but we're also doing it in order to make sure that we don't have any issues with sound or noise coming out of the car wash itself. In my backup and also in front of you, you see that the reading 30 feet away from the car wash is actually 44 decibels, which is very low. And we are not going to have any projected music or speakers projecting music or anything like that, or amplified voices. So with the site plan, you can also see that we're providing all the required landscaping, the screening of, let me back up, we had to redesign the building specifically for the code, Pompano Beach's code, because we're not allowed to have overhead doors facing a street. So if you look at the site plan, you'll see that there's an attendant booth that is all the way to the west side of the property, which is blocking the overhead door view. And on top of that, we're actually doing a privacy fence along 18th to make sure that no possible view of the overhead door is even able to be seen. And also Scott mentioned there is a gate there, but that's only for emergency access. I can go into the architecture, but it's all very interesting. There's a mix of materials and finishes and colors. The building has different heights in the facade for architectural interest. And I won't bore you with the details of the feasibility study. But it's all in your backup. But the most important thing to note is that it does actually emphasize that there is a need for this type of car wash in this market area. Actually allowing a car wash in this area will actually encourage less of the at-home car washing, which, as we mentioned, is already environmentally not good, destructive. And one of the very important things that I wanted to point out of the feasibility study, which used population information, characteristics of the area, the volume of the traffic that goes on Federal, I believe it even includes income information, is that it identified only 2 car washes within that 3-mile market area. And both of those 2 car washes are not the same. And I know you've heard this story before. It's not the same type of car wash. It's not an express car wash. I understand your frustration with hearing that all over again. I won't go into that. But what I will get into is that neither one of those car washes are within the 500-foot or the half-mile radius, which is defined as a neighborhood in your code. Oh, let me go back. So if you can see on the map, and I don't know if you can see the cursor, but our half-mile radius is somewhere around here for Lighthouse, and for Sparkling Image, it's about here. So the site is actually what's causing our hardship. The site shape. It's long and rectangular, which means our building has to be designed in an east-west orientation in order to accommodate the circulation, the queuing, the setbacks, everything that we have to meet, but most importantly, that queuing and that circulation kind of guides the building layout. Building a smaller building or building it in the northwest configuration is still going to require variances, probably feed traffic out into Federal Highway. It's not going to accommodate any of the access. And quite frankly, if you look at the site, it's 250 feet long. It puts the building right in the middle of almost the site. That type of condition is not specific to a retail shopping center or to an office building or to a gas station. It's only particular to a car wash. I'm not going to get into that. The uses are auto-oriented. As Scott mentioned, the west parcel has a commercial social club. Yes, it's zoned residential, but it is a commercial use. That's just a little snapshot of the building, and as you can see, the building actually starts right over here, which is about 50 feet from that rear zoning line. So regarding the 2 car washes that were pointed out in the feasibility study, Sparkling Image.
I'm going to have to bring it back in again. We need to hear about the variance request.
Yes, I've touched on that.
Okay. This is not my first rodeo.
Understood.
We've done 8 or 10 car washes, and I gave you the courtesy of combining these, but you're not giving us the courtesy of, when I ask you to focus on the variance, to please do that.
If you would like for me to read all the standards from the variance backup, I can.
One of the things you can do is I think the criteria is an important start. But you can.
Let me finish, and then if you have any questions, I'll definitely back up. The biggest issue with the variance is exactly what I just covered on the building length. The site is 250 feet long. Our building has to be the size to accommodate this type of circulation and this type of queuing. Making a shorter building is not going to solve the queuing, the circulation, the setbacks, the life safety response. None of that is going to work with a smaller building or a northwest or a north-south oriented building. I'm sorry, I jumped way ahead. So let me back up to the minimum necessary and the no special privilege, which both are variance criteria. Both of those car washes that were identified in the marketing study, going into one of them. So the Lighthouse, the Sparkling Image is located in Lighthouse Point. That one is not regulated by Pompano Beach standards. It is in a zoning district where a car wash is allowed by right without special exception, and it does have any of these separation requirements. The one that is in Pompano, which is Lighthouse, is in a B3 zoning district. It's a larger B3 zoning district, but it abuts, and I hate that I don't have the image, but it abuts to the east an RM30 and an RS3 single-family district. Both of those districts actually have true residential uses, not similar to our case. The one in Pompano Beach, BTR records, and I try to get that from Scott, only show that they've been there since 2016, but a Google Street View actually shows, and that little tower in the image, it actually says car wash. You can actually see that it's been there since even 2008 and maybe even before that. That is before your code was even implemented. I actually also went ahead and did a distance measurement from the edge of our building to the closest multifamily development, which is just to the northwest, to the north of the Squadron building, and also the closest single-family residence, which is to the west of the Squadron, and both of those are more than 170 feet away from our property. So therefore, this does not give us a special privilege. So this is the site plan that I mentioned, and in red you can see the emergency access that goes right out to the gate in the back. You could also see that little attendant building right over here. The landscape plan is also in your backup. And just some renderings. This is a view from Federal Highway. This is another view from Federal Highway. That's a view from 18th with that screening fence that we mentioned. And this is a view of the interior. So now, if you'd like, unless you have any specific questions, I do want to turn it over to Justin so that he can talk about the El Car Wash business. Do you have any questions?
You have a question?
Yeah.
Please.
I have questions. Same here too, please. When he's done.
So the sound, how, when you talk, I guess you talk to the residents, whatever, I mean, the sounds of the vacuums and everything like that in that area, that was one of them. Another one would be that it's a very busy intersection, of course. I don't know if you know, there's going to be two Publixes on both corners. There's the CVS, the Wawa's goes crazy. One thing that concerns me is that, and I see the layout, that's why you did it, or they did it, is that you go in on Federal and you come out on Federal. When there's a back street that you probably would be easier to take away some of the traffic, because that is a very, very busy intersection, Sample and Federal. So those are concerns that I feel.
May I have your name?
Justin Landau.
Spell it.
2831 South Bay Shore Drive, Miami, Florida.
Spell your last name, please.
Landau.
And have you been sworn in?
I have. To your question about noise, I think if I go to the next slide, if you don't mind. So just quickly about our company. This is obviously not this is definitely not the first one of these that we've built. This will be hopefully like our 40th down here in South Florida. So we've obviously been able to work with residents and work with city councils to alleviate or to address any questions about noise and traffic, which I'll talk about in a moment. So noise is a big misconception, I would say, for this industry. I think part of what I've tried to do is kind of evangelize the industry a little bit more, but just fix some of the misconceptions. So I think a lot of people have in their mind what car washes were 20 years ago, blue tent, not really taking care of the property, a lot of noise, a lot of traffic. So the industry itself has heard that and evolved. All the vacuums, we use a central vacuum system. So what makes the noise is the motor. The motor's housed within a concrete enclosure fully, so there's no noise from that. The blowers, which are at the end of the tunnel, which dry the car, are another source of noise. Those have silencers on them now and produce no more than ambient street noise when you're, call it 25, 30 feet away. We've installed those at the one that we built in Miramar here, and are doing that at pretty much all the sites and would do that here as well. So from a noise perspective, there's no more than ambient street noise at our property lines ever. And so that's a big focus for us, because ultimately we do want to work with residents. We have many sites that are abutting residential. And I would say to date, knock on wood, we've never had a noise complaint. And, we're locals, so rarely, we're accessible if there ever is any issues. To the question about traffic, that's a big part of stacking. We wash cars quickly so we can get them out of the site as well. But we would never build a site where we couldn't manage the queue on the site itself. So that's part of the design that we've had here. Obviously, as Paolo shared, we've done multiple queuing studies to make sure that when people turn into the site, like they were going to turn into a Publix or someone else, they can get in, get to this pay station, and then get off the site without any issues. So from a turn in and turn out perspective, we have multiple other similar sites where we've not added to the traffic or backed up the traffic along the way. To your question about Northeast 18th Street, if we could use that street, I would love that. We were doing this out of just a care for a residential street, but if there was an opportunity to open that large, massive gate that we were putting there between us and them to use it as an escape for residents or for customers, I would be very open to doing that.
So as far as the loudness, I understand what you're saying. It's probably newer models and all, of course, we're in the 2000s. As far as the intersection, what I was talking about is that when you can get them out in 5 minutes, whatever, I understand that, but that intersection gets so backed up that they can't get out. So that's what my concern is that I'm mentioning is that, yeah, you could get them out in 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but coming out of there, I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to get out of that Wawa, but very, very hard to get out of there, especially with people turning and all that.
Yeah, I think having a site that's a little bit off the corner is actually a benefit to us. If it was on the corner, I think that would be a lot different.
That's what concerns me.
Yep, and we have similar sites in Miami. We have some sites, sites on Federal Highway or US 1 in Miami. We have sites, very similar layout on a through lot, and same thing in Hialeah on 49th Street. Honestly, because of having enough queuing on our site, it ultimately doesn't become an issue because those cars can get out and we can stack 30 cars on this site. And the max that we ever kind of have ever in a queue is like 10 to 12. So there's more than 100% additional kind of capacity on the site as well. So understand the concern, and I think from our perspective, we can handle so many more cars. We should not have an issue ultimately on the site.
Yeah, I have just a quick question here. So when when a car leaves the actual car wash facility itself, it's a singular car lane, correct? You're not because I see that there's 3 flows of traffic towards the attendant booth, but when they pull into the
Correct.
car wash, it all consolidates into one. So at any given moment, only one car potentially could be leaving unless someone's leaving the self-vacuuming area?
That's correct.
That's okay.
Let me back up with you. Let me back up. Not so much on the design, but really, I don't see the hardship. You're asking for a variance. I know you want to build a car wash, and for whatever your reason is, that's your reason. But this is a fairly rectangular piece of property in a major thoroughfare. It's a B3 zoning. You can do all kinds of other things with this, and yet and is it self-inflicted? You said your testimony was your problems of direction and tunnels and everything was specific to car washes. If you put a store here, you put anything else is permitted. I'm giving you an opportunity to respond to it, but you can put anything else permitted in a B3. It's a rectangular piece of property. I'll call for you later.
Hi, good evening. Jana Loda with the law firm of Holland & Knight, offices at 515 East Las Olas, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and yes, I've been sworn. With respect to the variance, actually I was going to come up here and kind of recap a little bit on the variance criteria because I know that was important to you, Chair. So with respect to the hardship, the first thing I would note is that the car wash use, albeit a special exception, is still a use that is permitted within the B3, but it's a type of use such as special exceptions, that because the nature of it, it just requires an extra level of review and to ensure that the various criteria are met before it can be instituted. It is not a prohibited use. So with that kind of base in mind, looking at a piece of property as something that is a use that's permitted, assuming you can get the special exception approved, looking at that site, the site dimensions itself is a hardship based upon how a car wash use is basically laid out at its core. At its core, car wash has a tunnel. Admittedly, car washes that are accessory to a gas station tend to be smaller, but an automatic car wash, the tunnels have a certain length which prohibit it, given the particular dimensions of this property, which is 151 feet wide and 250 feet wide, and 151 feet tall, for lack of a better description, that there's no other way to orient this on the property. So the shape of the property, which is the first criteria for variance, subsection A, is that there's the topographic conditions, narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the parcel of land don't generally apply to other lands or are somewhat unique. Again, this is a very small parcel. It's less than an acre. So you are going to be constrained on what you can build. This, again, is a permitted use. This is an available piece of property. The variance is somewhat unique in the fact that we are being measured from a residentially zoned district, which doesn't have a residential property on it. We've done great strides in this application to help basically hide the operation of the actual car wash tunnel itself by actually enclosing each end so you don't even see the tunnel when you enter from either from Northeast 18th or from Federal Highway. So I believe that the shape of the property, given the fact that a car wash has a specific design, is the hardship in this instance. You're welcome. And I'm happy, because I know it was important to you, I'm happy to go through the rest of the criteria. Certainly.
It may be a hardship for a car wash, but it's not a hardship for everything else in B3. And the statute doesn't say it has to be a hardship for your specific intended use either. If we're gonna,
But as the property owner, as someone who's seeking to purchase the property, they're entitled to seek to permit any permitted use, or even again, a special exception use is a permitted use, assuming that the criteria can be met on a piece of property. And the property itself is creating a hardship to do it at this particular location. And I mean, I certainly see your point, but it is a hardship to the applicant as to this particular parcel.
okay. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I would like to go back to a line of questioning that I was thinking about. How many cars can utilize the wash tunnel at the same time? Are you funneling one in, and then when it completes, the next one goes in, or are you backing them up where it's gonna, like, what's the queue time of them exiting the actual tunnel?
I believe I can answer this accurately. If not, I do have someone standing over my shoulder who can. But I believe the tunnel can hold up to about 4 cars in tandem, possibly more. It's a conveyor belt type system, so as the cars come in, we have the triple drive-through lane to queue them up. Part of the purpose of that is that a large part of their business plan are memberships that you can buy, monthly memberships that allow you to wash your car more frequently. So they have a dedicated lane for the members only, so that they can kind of quick get in and get out if that's their choice. This is a unique operation.
This isn't answering my question, though.
Yes, I understand. I tend to do that. I'm sorry. But
I got you. Each car is on the conveyor, and they come out about 45 seconds to 60 seconds after one another, because one car goes in, then the next car goes in after it's gotten a significant distance away from the start of the tunnel.
Sure. So let's just say they're coming out and they're trying to exit onto Federal, and there's traffic there, backed up by the Wawa, backed up by the light. This is slightly concerning to me.
Yeah, so there's a pressure switch that's outside the conveyor, And if there's a traffic backup to get out, the tunnel just stops until that person who's at the exit tunnel has moved away, and then the conveyor continues. So it's all automated in that sense.
And if I may interject, not everybody exiting the tunnel is going to elect to immediately leave the property. There will be some that will choose to go use the complimentary vacuums and other equipment that they have there to clean the interior of their vehicle. And there's obviously stacking in that center aisle as well for people who then go to leave with respect to the interface with Federal Highway.
Okay.
I keep going with my misconceptions versus reality for 2 minutes.
Thank you. You answered the question, though.
Okay.
Thank you. Unless you had another question?
No, I'm sufficiently answered my questions there.
Okay. Counselor, did you have something you want to say? You have that look today.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just for purposes of the record, and I know we have, with these types of cases where they are seeking both special exception and variance, there are several elements that are floating in the midst of this sea of discussion. And so I wanted to make sure the record is clear as to what's before the board and what the criteria, even though I know you have reviewed that, I know you have this stuff before you, I just want to make sure it's clear because much of the discussion has been about special exception and whether or not a car wash is permitted on the site. So when you're looking at that criteria, the hardship question that has come up does not apply to whether or not the car wash is a permitted use on the site. The criteria that talks or considers the car wash are the 13 points, whether it's consistent with the comp plan, whether it complies with the zoning district standards, and some of those questions that you've raised fall into that category as to whether or not this permitted use squarely fits on the site because of these various elements. When you get to the variance discussion, which based upon, and pardon me as I try to get used to this computer, this laptop, your variance discussion is really related to the drive-through service facility and whether or not they can, whether or not they should be granted variance to the 100-foot requirement from a residential zoning district. They're requesting 50 feet. The code requires 100. So when you're looking at the variance question, that those issues or considerations must relate to whether or not there's a hardship or extraordinary and exceptional conditions that would permit this reduction from 100 feet to 50 feet. And the other 7 to 8 criteria that are used in reference to the variance. That's really where your considerations should be as it relates to variance, the 100 versus 50 feet, special exception, whether or not the car wash, based upon all of the criteria there, and I use the term or the phrase a good fit, meaning it's permitted if it is a good fit as described through whether or not there's an overburdening of capacity and all the things that are laid out there. I don't want to repeat it all to you. It's before you. I just want to make sure the record's clear as to your considerations for those items.
Thank you, Counselor. Oh, we're not there yet. We're not even close to motions. First of all, any additional questions? Okay, this is a public hearing.
Can I add something?
I just asked you. Go ahead.
I'm trying to put myself in his shoes as a business owner. If you look up and down Federal Highway, there's commercial right on Federal Highway. If you look behind this area, behind Wawa, behind this property itself, you would almost assume that that is a commercial zoning because it's a commercial use. There's a commercial use to the south of that. So it's almost kind of not very easy for anyone to kind of assume that there's a multifamily zoning district back there because it doesn't have an actual residential use. I feel like that's part of the hardship.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support of the applicant? Come on down. Come to this podium, please. Hi, I'm going to need your name, address, spell your last name, and tell me if you've been sworn in.
Good evening, Board. My name is James Argyropoulos, last name Argyropoulos. I have been property owner since 2006, and the variance does...
Your address, please.
I'm sorry, is 809 Northeast 17th Terrace, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33304.
Great. Have you been sworn in?
I have.
Carry on, please.
You brought up a good point about usage and B3. B3, you can go up and down US when the corridor there and see what's going on. There's a lot of for lease signs. I prepared a little bit of a statement in regard to just that. So bear with me here. The main feature of the subject site is a vacant C-class office building. It's 12,600 square feet of office building. Demonstrated by a pandemic-inspired work-from-home environment alongside artificial intelligence, offices are facing major challenges in securing long-term tenants. Standing vacant properties can detract from value, approachability, and overall safety of adjacent properties. There is an urgent need to service local neighborhood with uses that attract the public, promote well-being for the community, and are in harmony with surrounding businesses, as we all know that it does. To address that particular demand of what can service the community, the potential developer has supplied you guys with a demand study, which is very, very thorough and will show exactly that there would be a demand. I feel it's incumbent upon municipalities to take a look at the new environment that did produce indeed a hardship. There's no more office spaces. There's no more accountants in office spaces. There's no more call centers. So the types of uses that perhaps that you're used to seeing really have dwindled. We're talking about a major, major hardship across all sorts of C-class office space. Municipalities across the country are looking how to repurpose these sites. And it comes down to things like this, a variance. We are talking about 50 feet, and the property right behind is a vacant parcel with a sort of aloof type of banquet center. There really isn't much to do back there. The neighbor to the north uses the parking lot as excess parking. The variance, it would be gracious upon the board to see these factors and to be able to make a judgment as to a good fit, sir. The good fit does come into play with the harmony of surrounding businesses, the intended use from a very qualified operator, and their sites are beautiful. They spare no expense in the build. I fawned over their operation when I had my own thoughts of car wash. But they are the group to bring good development that attracts the public, not vacates the public. We're looking to bring people back to Pompano, and on that corner, yes, there's a lot of people, but car washes don't produce traffic, they abate traffic. So there's a little bit to be said with that. In an automated service, things are being timed. You can't have a good service if your customers can't use the service properly. So the automation is, have you ever been to an express car wash? I mean, have you seen a new one? I mean, they're pretty high tech. They've got a lot of bells and whistles for queuing and these types of things. But the main thing here is taking a look at the hardship, what the hardship is. The hardship is we're in a new reality that this C-class office space is not getting filled. And I'm not the only one. It just so happens that in my effort to try to find a use that trying to find a good fit, what's a better fit than having something next to a Wawa, an automotive repair shop that has their air compressors outside, their impact wrenches going, a car dealership north of that with the services vehicles. It's a very automotively centric area, but is hindered by a hardship. to modify the use to something that can attract the public in a clean way and promote well-being. It's a healthy service, it's a clean service, it's a modern service, and it provides a lot of curb appeal for a lot of people driving through a very busy intersection. So I would ask if you can consider all the things to see about how good of a fit it really is and understand where the spirit of the variance is actually coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you
Thank you, Board.
participating. Does anyone else in the audience wish to speak in support of the petitioner? Hearing none. Does anyone wish to speak in opposition? Hearing none. Closing comments?
Yes, I just wanted to add actually two things.
And this is for the variance. Let's be sure we're.
Okay, yes, for the variance.
Yeah, we're going to have a motion, just so you know, and there's no surprises, we're going to have a motion for the variance.
Understood.
And then after that is done, it would be for the special exception.
So just to add into that hardship, and I asked Scott to pull up the aerial just so that I can see. If you look at the aerial, 2 blocks even further north, it is the same exact scenario for every property that's along Federal Highway. It is that same width and everything behind it. It's multifamily and actually single family north of that. So basically, we're basically saying that none of the parcels along North Federal Highway in this area can have a car wash.
So whose hardship is that?
Let me finish. Short of buying all the properties to the rear and rezoning. Possibly a land use plan amendment, because that's also part of the issue, that's the underlying land use. That is an actual major hardship, considering that this is a busy highway where you want this type of use. You don't want this further in.
The hardship that we look for is the hardship to the property, not the hardship, and you know this, you worked here, is the hardship, not the hardship for somebody who wants to come in here and build something and, oh, sorry, we don't have anything big enough for you, so we'll just give you a variance.
Hand in hand.
It's not a hardship.
They go hand in hand because your code has certain standards specifically for a use.
Build a different something. You've got to, so everybody that comes in and says, our code doesn't fit their business, they should automatically qualify? I think you're looking at the definition of hardship very much in the wrong way. I'm not arguing on some of the other points that you may have brought out, but your definition of hardship is not my definition. Counselor?
Thank you, Jana Loda, once again for the applicant. To your point, Chair, and I think the point that Ms. West was trying to make is that the hardship is due in part, we've indicated with respect to the size of the property, the orientation of the property, that it's not necessarily restricted to a car wash use. The variance is being required for any drive-through use. We're being considered a drive-through use. That includes a host of other uses in your zoning code. To your point as to all the other uses that's allowed in the B3, it captures a lot of uses, and it's actually outlined in the staff report when they define what is a drive-through use, which includes use types that commonly have drive-through service include banks or financial institutions, restaurants, specialty eating, drinking establishments, drugstores, and pharmacies, just to name a few. So the issue that we have with a residential district right behind us, coupled with the size of the lot, you're going to see this issue with a host of other uses within the B3 that if they categorize as a drive-through, they're going to be required to come in here for a variance because, again, they're measuring from our property line across the street to the zoning district. So all those properties, it doesn't matter about the size. They're measuring from the property line, not the actual use. So all those properties along Federal Highway are very limited in terms of the type of use that they can have. And then looking back to the variance criteria, we've already indicated that the first criteria, when it's talking about the hardship, the specific size, shape, and dimensions of the site can be a basis for the hardship. That's in subsection A of the variance criteria. The second one goes into that it's not the result of the landowner. That goes back to they didn't affect the shape of the property. It's the shape that it currently is. We can't change that. The third criteria goes to the fact that the unique shape of the property, which is the item that's listed in paragraph A, would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the land or the structure, which again, the shape of the property, because of the typical shape of the type of the use that we have, or the fact that it's a drive-through, would preclude the use of the property for a drive-through, and a host of other types of uses that are classified as a drive-through. The next criteria is that it doesn't confer any special privilege on the landowner that's denied to other lands or structures. We did an analysis of some of the other car wash facilities, but I would note that the site is once again unique. It's unique to a lot of the other properties that run along Federal Highway, and would certainly be specific to our facts. The next criteria for the granting of is that it's the minimum necessary. The building has again been oriented as far close to Federal Highway as we can. But again, the variance, it doesn't really matter on the location of the building because it's being measured from the property line. The variance is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the code and preserves its spirit. And that's where the criteria for the special exception and all the things that we've indicated with respect to the landscaping, the queuing, the stacking, the special care that's been taken with respect to sound attenuation with the enclosure of the producers for the vacuums. The fact that actually at the end where the blowers are that have silencers, in it we actually have an enclosure for when you come out. So the wall itself that encloses the exit to the tunnel itself provides another effective barrier for noise attenuation. All of those things that we indicated with respect to the aesthetics of this facility, the fact that they effectively operate largely on daytime hours with minimal staff, no exchange of money, it's all done electronically, all shows, coupled with, let's face it, the water savings that you see with the lower use of water, the fact that the water is discharged into the sanitary sewer rather than going into our storm drains, all of that going to the various goals, policies, and objectives, and things that are outlined in the code for water conservation and the greening of and sustainability that you see in the code. And then the last, and I'm quick flipping through here because I know you guys probably want to move on. The next criteria is that it would not adversely affect the health or safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood or be injurious to the property improvements. Again, I'll just double back on all the things I just said with respect to the specific enhancements and improvements of this particular facility. The fact that we did hold a voluntary community meeting, which we not only sent the notices out to the owners on the tax roll, but recognizing that many of those may be tenants or occupants, we also sent a separate mailing to just the actual addresses themselves to the tenant and occupant, and didn't have anyone that showed objecting to the application. And then the last is that the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and I know the letters and the application outline a host of goals, policies, and objectives in the comprehensive plan that have been met. So with
I have a
that-
quick question.
Yes.
When you sent the mailer out, did you send the actual web link or QR code, or how were people supposed to log into the Zoom meeting? I'm just curious.
It was a Zoom.
So I would have to go into Zoom and type in the web address itself? Yeah.
No, I believe that it was a Zoom, and yeah, I guess they would put in, it was a phone call and a Zoom link, and so
Okay.
if you just go into Zoom, I think there's like a 10 or 11-digit code that you put in for the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So I apologize that my comments were probably longer than you expected, but I did want to hit those items because I know they were important to you that we cover that.
Thank you. All right, do we have any more questions? No more questions? You have a question?
No, just one more closing comment.
Sure.
There's 120,000 people who generally live in Pompano Beach, and within the 3-mile radius, there's 100,000 people, and there are 0 express car washes in that area. And as Paula noted, and Janet too, express car washing is a real need for communities to reduce water usage, in addition to not putting soaps and other things into your stormwater. So having these is kind of a, it's something every community should have. Whether it's here or not, like you guys can tell us, but there needs to be these facilities in Pompano. And the way that it works here, you've obviously never met me. We've been looking for a site here for 5 years because it's really hard to figure out one that works. And just the way your guys' code works, it's really hard to do that. And so this is as close as we've ever seen to something that could actually serve the needs of this community. And, and as Paula pointed out, like, it might be the only time ever because other things are going to have residential right behind them. So this situation of actually having commercial land behind us is just so unique, which is why we spent a lot of money just to get here. where we've never obviously came in front of you before with something we didn't think was worthy of your guys' time or consideration. So from our perspective, not meeting the criteria, just the uniqueness of this situation feels like the only time this might ever be able to exist on Federal Highway or even in this remote area. So that's obviously why we're here as well.
Thank you. Public, are you done, Paula? Public hearing is closed. Board discussion.
So we're going to take the variance first, and the variance is specifically about whether or not it can be 50 feet away from the boating people, right? The boat squadron people.
I'm going to let Scott answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Yep, yes, the variance is specifically about the separation between the drive-through facility and a residential zoning district, which that particular parcel happens to not be, have a dwelling unit.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So 50 feet versus 100 feet is the requirement. It's 50 feet, there's 50 feet of right-of-way.
And then, Mr. Chair, once we take this motion, we're going to open it back up for further discussion, correct?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
And that'll be to the special exception.
Yes. Perfect. Okay.
All right. So, any questions, comments, discussion? We're a quiet group. North, would you please call the roll?
No, we need a motion.
We need a
I'm
motion.
sorry, we're too quiet. It's been a long meeting. May
I'll
I,
happily make a motion, though, if you'd like.
somebody make a motion.
Do you want to do it? Or I can take it. So when in the planning and zoning case 2311000018, I move that we find there is competent substantial evidence in the record that all requirements for granting the variance have been met, and that we grant the variance subject to the 5, am I getting that right? 5? Yeah, 5 conditions requested by staff.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion that's been made and seconded. Further discussion? Because you can't have a vote until somebody makes a motion. Call the question.
Rich Daly,
Yes.
Joe Sarcuzzi,
Yes.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
Linda Thomas, Dan Yaffe.
Yes. That one's good. All right, now, we're going to have another motion for a special exception. And
So,
further
should we have discussion about it first?
We can have either discussion now, right now, because we're just us, or we
I
can.
mean, I would like to maybe have them speak again, that's the
No,
thing.
no,
Because we're, there,
Did you want to, Paula, did you close? Did you want to speak again for a special exception?
well, no, in case I say something or someone
No,
up here
we're
says
allowed
something.
to have
Yeah.
discussion. They closed their argument.
For the variance.
Well, we opened it for both. I assume we closed it for both. Paula, do you have anything else you want to add?
I incorporate all of my testimony into this request.
Okay, in that case, the public hearing is closed, and you can make another motion. We can have more discussion.
I'll let someone else make a motion on this. Okay, no one else wants, I'll make a motion then, that's fine. So in the planning and zoning case 23-17000007, I move we find there is competent substantial evidence in the record that all the requirements for granting the special exception have been met, and that we grant the special exception subject to the 5 staff conditions requested by staff.
Do I have a second? Thank you. We have a motion made and seconded. Let's further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I'm very concerned about the traffic still. Like, I know that they say that there's impediment or there's a queue to leave, but 45 seconds is a very short amount of time. And I know they say people are going to drive in to use the vacuums area, but it's right on that corner, and that corner is slammed. You know, I drive back from dropping my children off to school every day coming down that road, and it is always busy. So I just want to clarify my thought process.
I just know when you're trying to come out of the gas station there.
Wawa.
Yeah, Wawa, and it's,
Yeah, you're running right into the red.
take your life into your hands there.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, am I allowed to?
Yes, your staff, you can speak.
Okay. I just wanted to say,
I'm not trying to cut people off here.
they voluntarily, said they were going to close off 18th Terrace, but the code actually encourages the lesser, if there's a through lot, it encourages the use of the more local street rather than federal. So I think they did it as a courtesy to the neighborhood, but
Being that there is no neighborhood technically, and it's not really residential. It is residential, zoned for residential, but it's not really residential. That is my biggest concern, is the traffic. I think the facilities look beautiful. I think it is a need in the area potentially. I think it fits within the confines of the direct area, the Wawa, the whatnot, but I'm just very concerned about the traffic there, and I wouldn't see a problem with it coming out onto the back street there.
yeah, that could be vetted during DRC, because that is closer to code compliance.
We include that as a
Local
condition?
street. I'm sorry?
Could we include that as a condition to the special exception?
The question I would have on that, though, is if you see how the lanes are going, there's no way to go out that back way.
Well, they'd have to redesign it probably.
They'd have to redo the whole thing.
Yeah, but
If the board would like to make that as a condition, we are more than happy to.
See, this is why I wanted them to talk again.
Well, in that case, may I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'd like to make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Public hearing is now open.
Because we were actually discussing how we might modify the site plan, and I'm thinking, and Scott, you can weigh in, is that we have a dual drive-through lane that comes in. We can probably guide anybody exiting to use this north lane. That could be like a dual lane, whether it be to exit, and because we've got so much queuing, we do not anticipate people queuing back into that dual lane. So we can just make it so it would be kind of like a dual exit or drive-through lane. People are either coming up and then enter into the kiosks, or the option to leave the site as an alternative. So I'm sure we can work through the design to accommodate that, so we have that optional kind of relief valve through the rear, if that's the preference of the board.
Yeah, if you look at the site plan that we have pulled up now, if you guys can see that from where you're sitting, but we have an exit that goes out to 18th Street that was, as we said, closed off. That was going to be used for waste management and emergency vehicles, but we would actually prefer that to also be open, to allow for people to exit onto Northeast 18th Street as well. So I'd say we're fine with that.
yeah, in some ways the code requires it, where a through lot fronts a roadway of different classifications, direct access, driveway access to the lot shall be from the lower classified fronting street. The reason that wasn't actually required was because there is an existing curb cut on Federal Highway, but obviously the code encourages the more.
And if I can offer, while this is not a heavily staffed site, that's one of the unique things with their particular platform, is they don't detail cars, they don't have people drying the cars off. This is purely a customer-driven business. There are staff on site, so if there was ever an issue where there was potential queuing, they would be available to help direct traffic out the rear as well. So just again, to ensure that flow was moving.
Would you still have an exit onto Federal, or would the only exit be?
Basically, somebody exiting the site would either have the option to exit directly onto Federal, go to the vacuum stations to vacuum their car. If they're exiting, they can, and Federal's backed up, they can just continue going north, routing through the site, exiting onto Northeast 18th, or leaving the vacuum stations. They have the two options. I believe that's what you're trying to implement, is that you have the option of two different exits onto Federal. I'm sorry, two different exits from the site, forgive me.
Just from traffic purposes, I would rather not see cars leaving onto Federal.
I can understand that. It is clearly an important entrance and exit for any property on Federal Highway. I will tell you, there was a traffic study methodology, I believe, that was included in the backup. As you'll note, is that this particular use typically is a lower traffic generator than a lot of other uses, like fast food restaurant, a bank, a lot of general commercial uses. It's a lower traffic generator. I'm working with a lot of sites. I'm actually, not to use this name, but I'm working with the Chick-fil-A that has a similar issue, but in another jurisdiction north of you. And we found, even with the Chick-fil-A simulations, and it's got the same thing. It's got a gas station that's located just south of it, that once that light turns green, there are opportunities, for the traffic to get out. So to the extent a car is stacking or waiting to get out onto Federal Highway, there are opportunities to exit. But I think your suggestion is an excellent one, and it opened up something that we would have loved to have, but we did basically, in deference to the community to the west of us, was to close off that entrance. But opening it back up, I think, does provide a little bit more flexibility in terms of getting cars out of the site should there be any issue.
And just that different from like a QSR or some, a drive-through Starbucks, because there's no impetus for the cars to be pushed out of the site. The cars can leave at their own leisure because the tunnel will stop if there's a backup, and we have 8 cars of queuing at minimum, kind of post leaving the tunnel. So there's never a point where someone's like forced out onto the road or can't go. Like the site will just, essentially stop for a moment or two while that car exits. So while there might be cars on the site, they're waiting to get out. That's typical for any use for anyone who's going onto a road that's moving. So yeah, again, and as I said, we have a ton of these sites. We've never had an issue with people being able to get out. But I love the suggestion, and if we can open that back entrance up just to allow people out there, it'll just, as you said, alleviate some of the traffic on Federal if there is any, but it is pass-by traffic. So.
Did you want to make?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Really directed to Scott, because the discussion that's going on now has to do with alteration of the site plan, which I'm not sure if it is intended to go before the P&Z board or Planning and Zoning Board, or if this will be a staff review. That was my question, just so that this board is not sort of stepping on the jurisdiction of another board that may go in opposite direction. I just wanted to make sure.
Well, actually, the code kind of dictates that they really should be using the more local street if feasible, the lower classified street.
So rather than, the reason I was going that direction, so rather than making it a condition, the applicant can voluntarily redesign its site plan to be compliant with the code. That was a question.
I believe, yeah, I suppose. I think the initial idea, as we already talked about, was that as a courtesy to the neighborhood, they didn't want to do that, and also there already are curb cuts on Federal, so this code provision, while it strongly encourages it and is a requirement for brand new development, says that use the lower classified street as the entrance and exit whenever, to the extent possible.
James.
You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question of our city attorney. This past discussion here has been on traffic. I'm no traffic engineer, but the traffic on Federal Highway, no matter what business you put on there, is going to bring more cars. I want to know, are we able at this board to talk about traffic? Because any business that's there, this business wants to be there, it should be there on its own merits. I don't think we should be discussing traffic, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I appreciate that. Traffic is a part of the discussion for the special exception. If you look at the criteria, I'm trying to make sure, yes, there it is. So 4 talks about avoids overburdening the available capacity of existing public facilities and services, including but not limited to streets and other transportation facilities, and it goes on. Then number 5 says, is appropriate for its location and is compatible with the general character of neighboring lands and the uses permitted in the zoning districts of the neighboring lands. Evidence of this standard shall include but not be limited to population density, intensity, character of activity, traffic, and parking conditions, and the number of similar uses or special exception uses in the neighborhood. So traffic is a consideration.
Thank you, James, but the reason why I asked that, because if someone wanted to put a business there that did not have to come before this board for a special exception or a variance or whatever, traffic wouldn't be an issue. In other words, if somebody could use that piece of property without coming to the city for any type of a special,
By right.
right, that they could build it by right, then traffic would not be an issue. So I guess that's what I was thinking, and thank you for the clarification, sir.
I think the board's concern is really focused on the volume of vehicles going through the site for this type of use, as opposed to the volume of vehicles for, say, the previously existing office use, where people come and leave, as opposed to a steady flow of vehicles throughout the...
I just wanted to get it straight in my mind, because I know if I had a business that I could put on there by right.
No, yeah, I just want to clarify something too very quickly. The reason why it's a special exception is because it's a car wash within the B3 zoning, and it's a heavier usage of the parcel, which includes the traffic portion of it, which is why I was making all my comments, Charlotte.
Okay. I was just
So noted.
I don't want to
Thank you.
belabor this, but I was just thinking that
Microphone.
like I would want to put a business there, traffic wouldn't be an issue.
For sure, but-
End of discussion.
Okay. Further comments, further questions? Questions, comments? Public hearing is now closed. Again, board discussion or a motion?
So has the client agreed to modify the site plan to utilize the entrance exit on either side?
They said they would voluntarily do it according to the city attorney, I believe, and
That's what I thought I heard.
Yeah, we're happy to add in the utilization of the
Okay.
exits.
Yeah, just confirming.
Okay. You make the motion?
We already have a motion.
yeah, I made the motion,
That's
Chair,
right, you
Mr.
did
Chair.
make a motion. Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
Yes, Ms. Thomas.
So, further discussion? That seemed like it happened so long ago.
I think that with the addition of the extra exit, I'm more comfortable with the project.
Okay? Further discussion? Call the roll.
Richard Daly,
Yes.
Linda Thomas. Yes. Joe Circuzzi,
No.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
and Dan Yaffe.
No. We're going to take a, what time is it? 7:30. We'll take a 10-minute break. Here.
We got one more to do.
All right. We're back in session. Counselor, it's nice to see you.
Yes.
I think the beard is new.
Yes, my wife likes the beard, so I have a beard. That's the story of the beard.
Join the club.
Happy wife is a happy life.
That's right.
All right, tell us who you are, and then we'll get Scott rolling.
Good evening.
I know who you are.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Nice to be here tonight. My name is Matthew Scott. I'm a zoning attorney at the law firm of Today, Miskell & Backman with an address of 14 Southeast 4th Street, Boca Raton, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you. Mr. Reale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening again. First, I have to point out that there is a Scrivener's error on the staff report and the agenda of the PZ number. The notices, however, did go out correctly, so we're okay there.
Okay, so we're on P&Z 23-15-000008.
No.
Not the right number?
Correct, that it's not the right number. It is 23-1700000.
But for the record, this is still for GMD Investment Properties.
Yes, it is.
LLC.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
for
we
24.
fulfilled our noticing now.
Yes, it's okay,
on.
thank you. The applicant landowner is requesting special exception approval as required by section 155-4228A1 of the Pompano Beach zoning code in order to utilize a portion of the subject property that is zoned I-1 for outdoor storage as a principal use. The property is located on the north side of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and on the west side of Northwest 24th Avenue, about a quarter of a mile west of Powerline Road. The subject property has an approved site plan on file via PRA number 99-2756 for a parking lot. BTR records show a charter bus service operated from the site through 2017, but there's not been a business with a valid BTR since that time. The applicant seeks approval to operate a business on the 0.59-acre site that provides storage containers to area construction sites. Empty containers and trucks used to deliver the containers will be stored on the subject property. Because there is no principal building on the site and because most of the site will be utilized for this purpose, the use is considered outdoor storage as a principal use, which requires special exception approval in the I-1 zoning district. Please note that the site has split zoning. While the majority of the subject property is zoned I-1, the southernmost portion that fronts Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard is zoned B3, which prohibits outdoor storage. Therefore, if the special exception is granted, the outdoor storage area may only be located within the portion of the site zoned I-1. The applicant's narrative, conceptual site, and landscape plans suggest this configuration will be honored. Plans show much of the portion of the site zoned B3 will be heavily buffered, obscuring views from MLK Boulevard. Although the site has existing curb cuts at both MLK and Northwest 24th Avenue, the applicant's narrative states vehicles will enter and exit along Northwest 24th Avenue, which should keep traffic flowing along MLK. The surrounding uses are predominantly industrial, including but not limited to outdoor storage, so the use suggests compatibility with existing development patterns. The applicant has indicated they intend to seek a minor administrative adjustment to reduce the required landscape buffers along the west, north, and east lot lines by 10%. So there's a 10-foot requirement, 10-foot width, so they're going to be proposing 9 feet through an administrative adjustment. One last thing, there is a code violation that is in your backup. It was for, I believe, unpermitted paving, and that we can discuss that in further detail with our staff here, Terry Ann Boyd. There are 13 special exception review standards which are included in your backup. The applicant has addressed each of these standards, and should the board determine the applicant has provided substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those review standards, staff requests the board include the following 5 conditions. And the first is to obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including zoning use certificate and a business tax receipt for the use. The second recommended condition, close out all open building permits. The third recommended condition, outdoor storage shall be strictly limited to the area on the site zoned I-1. Outdoor storage is prohibited in the B3 area of the subject property. The fourth condition, substantial compliance to the conceptual site plan and landscape plans submitted with this application. Permit plans shall indicate fence and wall height and type, and where outdoor storage will be staged. Permit plans shall provide parking islands at the end of each parking row and include continuous curbing throughout the vehicular use area. And the fifth and final recommended staff condition is compliance with all outdoor storage screening standards. Materials shall not be stored higher than the height of the screening. The applicant shall successfully obtain relief of the proposed 1-foot reduction in the required 10-foot landscape buffer width along the northeast and west lines, or submit plans that fully comply with the perimeter buffer and screening standards for principal outdoor storage. And that concludes my report.
Can you start at the top again?
What's that?
Mr. Scott?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott. Hopefully, this is a much simpler presentation and application here. I'm here on behalf of my client, GMD Investment Properties Incorporated. I'm joined by the owner and CEO of the company, who's very nervous. Her name is Gina Devine. Hopefully, we won't have to bring her up to answer any questions. With that being said, as Scott shared, we're here for a special exception for outdoor storage. I think it'll help explain the application if I tell you a little bit about the business. My client operates a small business in the area that has had some success, and so they need some space to store their containers. What they do is supply construction sites, cruise lines, yachts, the marine industry with containers for them to fill up with materials or with garbage. And then they have trucks that take that garbage or waste, whatever it may be, lawfully dump it wherever it needs to be dumped, and then they need to store the containers somewhere. So their website is thegarbagelady.com. It's a small female-owned business. They've been in operation since 2001, and they have some drivers that have been there a real long time. So they are a locally owned business. As I said, they have these roll-off containers for residential, commercial cleanup, and construction sites. The last point I shared, though, is how they are licensed to service some of the cruise lines. So it's an interesting small business. They have 3 trucks total. And then they have these storage containers that they store. They need somewhere to store, and so they're growing, and they've identified this site in Pompano Beach. Let me jump to that. Here is the project location. It's west of 95. It's on Martin Luther King Boulevard, west of Power Line as well, on the north side there. Here is a zoomed-in aerial. As Scott mentioned, it's a 0.6-acre site. You can see that on all sides it's surrounded by some pretty heavy type industrial uses with outdoor storage. But because we have no principal building, this introduces the special exception requirement. The zoning is I-1, and I want to talk about the code enforcement piece for a second there. My client bought the property this year. They bought it with this code violation. The prior owner paved it without a permit. Obviously, our special exception application and the permitting, changes we're going to make to the site will completely resolve the code enforcement issues. So we've already spoken with code enforcement staff. We have an extension on that because I believe we're on the same page with them that this process, if approved and permitted, will resolve the unpermitted paving work. I added in here a street view from maybe a couple years ago, just to give you an idea that there is some pretty mature existing vegetation, and that while there is an access drive on Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard, it's been closed off for quite a while, and we don't intend to use it. There's a access point on the side street there behind that truck in the image. And so here's our conceptual site plan, nothing too exotic or sexy to share with you. We're showing some landscaping in the front, a few parking spaces for these 3 trucks. And then in the back there, that's open, we would be storing these containers. We'd maintain the main drive, and this being a small business, we're trying to keep as much of the existing landscaping as we can. Want to make sure that we're not changing too much to save them as much money as possible. And so then here is the landscaping plan. The code requires for outdoor storage in I-1 zoning that there be a 25-foot buffer in the front and that there be 10-foot buffers on the sides. And so we are intending to comply with all of those requirements. The code allows us to ask staff for a 10% reduction. So again, I'm trying to maximize my client's space here and save her money, so I'm going to seek that. But as Scott noted, if we're unsuccessful, then we'd have to comply with code. Getting to the special exception criteria, candidly, so this board's very familiar with special exceptions. I view them as a test. They're a process where the city says this use could be permitted, but we need to test to make sure the applicant is A, serious about the business and can comply with the criteria, can pass the test. And so this is a great application. We comply with all criteria. First one, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? Comprehensive plan identifies this as a commercial area and has various objectives and policies that want to promote small businesses, promote local businesses, and encourage the industrial areas of the city. Complies with all applicable zoning district standards. This is I-1 zoned. The proposed use is a special exception use. So this is sort of a circular criteria if we think about it, because what it says is you got to apply for the special exception. For the use-specific standards, the use-specific standards are straightforward. You got to provide the buffers. This makes sense because if the city didn't have this, these industrial uses, they can be a mess. We all know that. And so this is part of the test. We're saying to applicants, we're saying to business owners, we'll let you do industrial uses, but you need to take care of your property. You need to take care of it primarily by buffering it with landscaping. And so that's what we're doing. As far as the next few criteria, it speaks to whether the use overburdens the available capacity, various public facilities. There's no sewer capacity issue. There's no principal building. There's really no traffic because there's only three vehicles coming in and out of the site. And so this is not in my view, something that's legitimately in dispute. There's no overburdening of public facilities with this use. The next criteria asks whether it's compatible. That's why I showed the aerial, just to show you that it's surrounded by pretty heavy industrial uses. It's a 0.6 acre site. Directly behind it's a pretty heavy industrial use, and so this use is very much compatible with the surrounding area. It's an area that the city has identified for industrial uses, and so it does make a lot of sense for this to operate in this neighborhood. Next criteria asks whether the use is going to avoid significant adverse odor, noise, glare, and vibration impacts. There will be virtually I should say, no noise, odor, or vibration type of impact.
I have a question about this. If you're dealing with waste and garbage, how is there to be no odor potential from that?
Sure. So as I said in the beginning, the way that there's no waste that's brought to the site whatsoever. So the containers, as an example, are brought to a cruise ship. They're filled up with waste. My client's truck then takes it to a waste facility, dumps it out, completely empties it before bringing it back to the site.
Is it cleaned before it's brought back to the site?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's purely a dry storage scenario. So getting back to this, quite literally the only things that are happening on site are loading the containers on and off of a truck and then driving them out. The hours of operation are normal daily operations, no nighttime hours whatsoever. The gates are locked in the evening hours until the morning. The next criteria I spoke about, but I'll just reiterate for the record, as we lawyers love to say, the use, it adequately screens, buffers, or otherwise minimizes adverse visual impacts. We have a heavy buffer in the front and buffers on all sides. We're complying with what the code requirements are in that regard. Next criteria is whether it avoids significant deterioration of water and air resources, scenic resources, and other natural resources. Frankly, there's just no impact on resources with this use. As Scott said in his staff report, this was previously a van or charter bus storage facility, and so the use is similar in that regard, and we're not taking away any natural resources with this project. Maintain safe and convenient ingress and egress and traffic flow. As I stated, we're not going to be using Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard, the access point there. Generally speaking, in the planning world, we want to discourage new driveways on major thoroughfares and encourage them on side streets. This is something that was discussed at some length in the last application, so we're going to be using the side street access only. And that allows for the protection of property values and the ability of neighboring lands to develop uses permitted in the zoning district. Frankly, the project is going to have no impact on the ability of other uses to develop. This is an industrial area, and so this is supportive of sort of the small business base in this area. That being said, thank you for allowing me to run through my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have further questions, yeah. Can you describe, you said it's waste, can you describe what the waste is specifically? Because there's a lot of different things. You said construction and cruise ships. So is it food products? Is it construction materials? I'm just trying to better understand. And then second to that, can you describe the cleaning process? Because if it's not thoroughly cleaned, it could increase the amount of vermin, rodents in the area, which would be detrimental to the other businesses in the area.
Sure. So with regard to the first question, it's all variety of waste. So they service construction sites around South Florida, so there would be construction debris that would be put in the containers. Similarly, for the cruise ships, yes, there is food waste that is included with that. My understanding from speaking with my client is that the place where they go to dump it has cleaning facilities for them to wash the containers out before they bring them back.
Yeah, I have a few questions. Visiting construction sites, oftentimes construction dredge spoil or excavated material is contaminated. Do you haul contaminated materials?
No, there's no contaminated materials that they use. I don't think they have the permits for that. I think it's only more standard waste, I guess, is what we'd say. There's not a contamination component to their license or their business.
So one of my questions was also what is the cleaning process and how and where are the roll-on, roll-off containers?
Sure, I should have my client speak to that because
Thank you.
right here's good. Go ahead, just introduce yourself and your address.
Gina Devine, 1024 South Palm Way, Lake Worth Beach, Florida, and it's Devine.
Have you been sworn in?
I did.
You already have been?
Yes.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Okay. So when it comes to the international waste, which is the cruise ships, we take it to the Wheelabrator, and they are required actually to rinse out my container by law. So there is no food waste coming back. Now the C&D is just we take it to a sorting facility like you would. There's actually probably one located in Pompano. I think there's a few. And we dump it out, and all the debris rushes out because you tilt the container and it comes out. So there's no food waste in there, and if it is, it's left at the sorting facility.
So are the containers sealed to prevent any leachate from dripping out?
Yeah, the USDA containers are certified with the Department of Agriculture to be leak-proof.
Okay. Also, on the site, are you providing any restrooms or trash?
No.
So if drivers need to use the restroom when they're leaving the vehicle?
They come to the office when they drop off the tickets and use our restroom, which is in Deerfield.
Okay. So far as stormwater management, obviously, there's a stormwater management system on the site, I assume. I understand that the containers are cleaned, but obviously there's the potential for the trucks to drip oil and whatnot. Is the stormwater management system, currently up to requirements and what maintained?
Well, so it's been a parking lot for a long time. As part of our plans, we're redoing the parking lot, and so we'll comply with whatever the city requires relative to that, but we're not intending to change stormwater configuration.
Okay, but it will be certified and brought up to grade, and the stormwater management plan will be...
In order to open, we'll have to go through that permitting process with the city.
And then my other question is, why can't the facility, being that it's a parking lot for 3 trucks, accommodate the 1 extra foot for the required landscape buffer on the 3 sides?
Yeah, so it's a 0.6 acre site, and we wanted to try to save my client as much money as possible on the cost of installing the buffer. So the code allows for us to seek that. So through staff, not through this board, right? So we're not even asking this board to approve that. Trying to save a small business owner money here on the cost of a buffer for a site that was used this way for used in a similar sense, and so we're going to pursue that. If it doesn't work and when I'm not able to save that money, then that is what it is, and we'll comply with code. That's the straight answer as to why we're trying to minimize the size of that.
And how does the city look at granting that sort of a relief?
It's called a minor administrative adjustment, and it has its own review standards similar to a variance, but obviously you don't have to prove a hardship, but you have to
Just
justify.
curious, obviously it's not completely related, but curious what those review standards
I could pull them up, yeah.
generally are.
I should have them.
Would you be opposed to including some sort of facilities on the site for lavatory for drivers? I just don't want to see waste. I think Penny brought up an excellent point there.
Yeah, we're unable to do that. They have an office nearby. This is a pure storage site where they bring the truck, pick it up, and take it. We are on our really challenge here to make this business work, and so that's not something that we'd be able to do, is to add, because doing that is way more complicated than adding a bathroom. It's adding plumbing, adding a structure, introducing a minor site plan application process, right? Okay. And so that's a horse of a different color than what this business is looking to do, respectfully.
Okay.
Okay, while Scott, you're looking up minor adjustments. Do we have any other questions?
Kind of a stupid question, I think, but so it's just going to be, the gates will be locked all the time, and it's the facility, they're just going to come in, drop off, whatever, lock the gate and go. That's just a park, and that's all you're doing.
Yeah, so the business is doing pretty well, and they needed to find a new place, and they identified this site in Pompano Beach just to store these containers and the 3 trucks.
This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support of the petitioner? Hearing none. Does anyone wish to speak in opposition? Again, hearing none. I don't think we had any correspondence. You're not in the mainstream there. Penny, do you need your questions answered? Or?
I have it pulled
Okay.
up. Yes. Okay, a minor administrative adjustment shall be approved only on finding that there is competent substantial evidence in the record that both the limitations in the allowable adjustments and the following standards are met. A, the requested administrative adjustment is not inconsistent with the character of development in the surrounding area and will not result in incompatible uses. B, any adverse impacts resulting from the administrative adjustment will be mitigated to the maximum extent practical. C, the administrative adjustment is of a technical nature, i.e. relief from dimensional or design standards, and is either, 1, required to compensate for some unusual aspect of development site or the proposed development that is not shared by landowners generally, or 2, the proposed adjustment will provide an alternative which shall achieve the purposes of the requirement through clearly superior design, or 3, proposed to protect sensitive natural resources or save healthy existing trees. Also, item D, the administrative adjustment will not substantially interfere with the convenient and enjoyable use of adjacent lands and will not pose a danger to the health and safety. And there's 2 more, almost done. The administrative adjustment is supporting an objective from the general purpose statements of the base zoning district where located, as specified in certain zoning code sections, or within a purpose statement of a special base zoning district, a planned development zoning district, or an overlay district. And the last standard is the administrative adjustment is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just have one question further. Thank you. Can we just hear from code very quickly, just to verify that everything is going to be copacetic, for lack of a better word? Carrie Ann?
Code?
Yeah.
Okay. See, and you thought you got away without having to speak.
She was just sitting there really quiet.
Thank you, Carrie Ann.
Good evening, everyone. First time here. Happy to be here in the absence of Mario Sotolongo. So I am Terry Ann Boyd. I am the code supervisor. And yes, there is an existing case.
I'm sorry, Terry, have you been sworn in?
I was sworn in.
Thank you.
Adequately. Yes, thank you. So there is an existing code case for this property. Just for the record, the case number is 23-09001274, and the property was cited for work without permits. To reiterate what has been said before, yes, if the exception is granted, then this will allow the code case to be closed. So at this point in time, code has no objections.
What type of work was done without permits?
It was paving of the facility, so there was some asphalt and resealing coating.
You good now?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, I do. Go ahead.
So, since they did the paving and all that, what about I don't know if anyone's meant drainage? drainage, floodage over there? I mean, how does all that get done over there? What's,
Sure, so as I said, the prior owner did the paving without a permit.
right, so how does the city know that it's up to standard for this, for sewage-wise?
Right, so prior to my client closing on the property, the prior owner was in the process of resolving this code violation by simply applying for a paving permit, and that was in process. We told them to stop because we're going to fix it, and so there were no issues raised during that, from my review, with drainage whatsoever.
So, but she just mentioned that they're gonna, if we pass it, it's gonna be obsolete, so does that mean you're gonna go in with a plan to redo it, the parking lot?
That's right, right, so
Okay.
that's why,
Or will it have drainage?
correct, yes, there's an
That's what I need to know.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, I probably overcomplicated it, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, any closing comments?
I just thank you for your time. I just, as we showed with our presentation, I believe there's competent substantial evidence that we comply with all the criteria for a special exception, so we would respectfully request approval.
Thank you. The public hearing is closed. Board discussion or a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
In P and Z case number 23-1700008, I move we find that there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all of the requirements for granting a special exception have been met, and that we grant that special exception subject to the 5 conditions requested by staff.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion. It's been made and seconded. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Joe Circuzzi,
Yes.
Benny Cutt,
Yes.
Richard Daly,
Yes.
Linda Thomas,
Yes.
Dan Yaffe.
Yes, you're approved.
For the record, I just want to know if Charlotte said the right number. Oh, you did? Great. Okay, cool.
She did.
I wasn't sure if you said the right number or not.
Doubt Charlotte. Okay, guys, we have one more thing on our
Oh, he
agenda.
just wanted to know you were doing good today, don't you worry.
Martha, you want to just tell us what we're looking at?
Yes,
Hey, guys?
Yes, I even wrote it down.
I included on your laptops there a copy of the upcoming calendar for all the meetings, so I just wanted to make sure that if anybody had any objection to these dates.
We checked for all major holidays, Jewish holidays, et cetera. There doesn't seem to be any conflict. It's,
Or is our stipend being doubled this year?
Yes.
Can we triple it? At this point, can we just triple it? No?
What you got last year?
Hey, the cookies are a lot better this year.
Hey.
Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
approve it.
So is everybody good with the calendar?
I assume we are.
Yeah.
All in favor,
Still the
say
third
aye.
Thursday, right?
Aye.
You need a motion?
I move that we accept the calendar as presented
Second.
by Martha.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to
I
adjourn.
so move.